There's a weird irony that only yesterday we posted a video saying how different things affect people very differently in World of Warcraft because we all play it differently. And today's no different. We need to look at how you're going to gear your character in the Shadowlands. Before we jump into this, we need to understand where a lot of the changes you're about to hear are stemming from, and they're mainly stemming from the Weekly Vault. The Weekly Vault is a new addition to the game in the Shadowlands, and it is really, really good. It is leaps and bounds above BFA, and it's one of the best things I've seen so far. What is the Weekly Vault? Well, if you've been living under a rock, you won't know about it, but essentially, instead of getting that weekly chest that you get right now in BFA, and just as you did in Legion, based on the entirety of the Mythic Plus you did last week, you get one item. That's it. You open it up and you close your eyes and you hope to God it's got that thing in it that you really want and not something that's utterly useless, and then usually we're left with disappointment on our faces. Well, they're looking to change that in the Shadowlands, and what they're going to do is give you choices, up to 9. So if you do absolutely everything of high-level PvP, lots of Mythic Plus, and Raid, when you open your weekly chest, you will have a potential 9 choices of items to choose one from, and that's the important thing, because people still get that wrong. You can only take home one item, but this time you'll have a choice. And we had it confirmed yesterday, there'll be no duplicates. That means that you can have boots, chests, shoulders, bracers, trinkets, weapons, up to 9 different things, and you can say, I want that one. Now, this is slightly in conflict with Blizzard's philosophy going into the Shadowlands, which is let gear be gear, and let's move away from what Blizzard has been doing for like the last 10 years, which is increasing quantity over quality. Certainly with the release of Classic, people have remembered exactly what it was like to see that Ash Candy, to see that Dark Edge of Insanity, and to see that Judgment Helm, all these items that people crave and they love and they care about it and complete their set and they feel awesome about it. In a game that has been gradually increasing, just showering with loot and then leading them down this RNG generation of Titan Forging, Corruption, gem slots and tertiaries that we've been seeing, it's hard to make that really, really good item. What Blizzard was hoping for is that there would be so much RNG that you would eventually get the perfect item, and that's what you would be excited about. But it hasn't really worked out that way for the huge amount of the player base. So they're reining it in. In Shadowlands, there's going to be significantly less loot available, but hopefully that means the quality and intrigue into those items will raise alongside it. Now that's up to Blizzard to design intriguing and interesting items, and so far not really seen that, but we'll hope and pray that that's the plan going forward. Now, how are they going about that? Less drops from raid bosses, and significantly less loot from Mythic Plus. Mythic Plus will now only award 1 item in the chest for completing that Mythic Plus. That means that a lot of things are going away in the Shadowlands, such as teaming up with people who have the same armor type, so you can gear a character very, very quickly to a very decent item level. That's going away. Stacking people in order to get your own reward is very, very much a lower chance. But the side effect of that, of course, is those guys who only have time for 1 or 2 Mythic Pluses per week now only have a 20% chance of actually getting an item at the end of that run, and that run feeling like an utter waste of time. Of course, there might be some trading and things going on, but generally speaking, when you enter a dungeon, you have a 20% chance now of getting something to even drop for you. That's just the nature of how it's going to be instead of the 2 or 3 items that we currently have in BFA. Now that should be offset. That should be offset by the Weekly Vault, which allows you to have more choices. So essentially, they're turning Mythic Plus into just a weekly chest generator. That's all it is. So, in that vein, they decided that a good idea would be to reduce the max item level reward that you can get from the end of a dungeon to 3 item levels below Heroic. And there's some more twists in here as well before you go crazy. So, the first thing is, the weekly cutoff right now is actually going to be Mythic 14. In terms of the Weekly Vault. If you want that Mythic quality item, that Mythic raid quality item, and do note they are repeating what they did in Nyalotha, in that in Castle Nathria, the new Shadowlands raid, the first 8 bosses will be of a Mythic item level, and then the last 2 bosses will have a slightly higher item level, which is outside of the Weekly Vault and Mythic Plus grinding purview. So once you complete your Mythic Plus 14, at the end of the week in your Weekly Vault, you will have at least 1 item which is up to the same item level standard as those first 8 bosses in Castle Nathria, exactly the same it is now in Nyalotha. Now then, if you do Mythic Plus 15, this will raise the end of dungeon reward to the next stage. So between Mythic plus 12 and 14, you will get to the normal gear level. And then once you get to Mythic 15, you will have the highest possible reward. But if you're just looking to get your weekly chest, you only need to do Mythic 14. Why have they dropped it to 3 levels below Heroic? And what are the impacts of this on a number of players? Well, it depends. Firstly, it's pretty clear that the intention behind this change is to stop gear trading, especially in the early weeks of brand new raid content, new season coming out. It's very intentional that it's just 3, which is a very minor difference below Heroic item level, to stop people farming M+, and then being able to trade loot inside the Heroic raid. Why do they want to stop that? I don't know, but they clearly have an issue with it. Similar to why personal loot was introduced in the first place. And the likelihood is they just want to slow down players' progress. Now, of course, this is only really a problem for the first couple of weeks if you're the kind of guild that has players, if you're a Heroic and up, and you have players who are available during the day, and they like to go out and do some Mythic Plus, and those players in your team who have to work all day and then come back and rush into the raid, is that you were able to trade your loot with them, and therefore the whole team got stronger. Something I particularly enjoyed was that rush to get gear. Mythic Plus, unfortunately, in terms of character progress, at least if you were previously in BFA, if you were a Mythic Raider, had a very short lifespan, because the likelihood is if once you started Mythic Raiding, you would replace all that gear significantly, and therefore Mythic Plus held not much value for you, outside of extremely random Titan Forges and things like that. That is now going to extend to Heroic Raiders as well, and I wonder what the bite back will be to Blizzard once the Heroic Raiders realise that Mythic Plus now no longer, because there's no Titan Forging, there's no corruption or anything like that, that Mythic Plus in terms of gearing and filling out those slots has way less value now than just Heroic Raiding. It doesn't have no value, so it should be clear. It's 3 item levels lower. It's not useless by any means. For most players, after the first initial month, things are going to be as they are in BFA for the most part. If you're somebody who pushed high keys, you were used to the idea that you had to like Mythic Raid in order to do that in the first place. Now, who really gets hurt by this? Those players who love Mythic Plus and were hoping and praying that Blizzard would go into a full progression path down the Mythic Plus route. Now, technically, that does exist, and it's actually better than it is in BFA. And that comes back to the weekly vault. If you are somebody who exclusively plays Mythic Plus, you are still bound by the rules of BFA of waiting for your weekly chest in order to get the big bump. It's not going to occur inside of Mythic Plus itself. That still remains. But this time around, with the selection process, you should get much better items and more of them than you would in BFA. Because if you're doing, say, 10 or 15 Mythic Pluses a week at a high level, because that's the content you enjoy, you will now get 3 choices of items from that weekly cache, instead of doing what we do in BFA, which is just get hope and pray for the one. The sad news is, though, and I do agree with the guys, and I've spoken, I talk a lot with the Mythic Pluses. We had the Dungeon Round Table just not long ago with very high Mythic Pluses, is there are several of them who do not want to raid. They don't enjoy raiding. They do it because they have to in order to get the gear to do the content they enjoy, and they don't want that. They would like Mythic Plus to be a sectioned offset part of the game where if they are good quality players and they are doing 20s and 20 plus, then they should be rewarded appropriately for that at the same rate that Mythic Raiding rewards. Unquestionably, if you are a Mythic Raider, you move up those item level ladders considerably quicker than you do by waiting for your weekly cache to report every single item slot with really good stats all the time, especially when you can trade amongst 20 people rather than the 5 in your group. That is something that I'm sad is gone. Now, don't be too sad if it is the case that you feel like Blizzard has turned your back on you. They have for now. But let's not forget, and I want to be clear, Blizzard flip-flops its philosophies all the time. So although right now they're definitely putting the dagger in the idea of Mythic Plus being a straightforward endgame progression system if you are pushing it very, very high, that could change at any time. Let us not forget that it was only one expansion ago in Legion where their philosophy was play how you want, and we will reward you appropriately no matter how you play World of Warcraft. So if it was artifact power, it comes from everywhere. You want legendaries, it comes from everywhere. It literally comes from whatever content you enjoy. And of course, now we're going into the Shadowlands where it's play how we want you to play, do what we want you to play. We don't like the way you trade gear. We don't like the way you do this. We don't like the way you're doing that, and we want you to play this way. So they flip-flop on this kind of stuff a lot. Sadly, it would be nice to be consistent, but they're trying to move the pendulum back. That's going to have some pains with it. They went too far with quantity of loot and lower quality. And now they want to swing it back, so way less quantity, but higher quality, hopefully. Now, there are some other good things that have come from this. One is, it seems very apparent now, looking at the item levels of things, that they're going to really squash down the leaps we made on item gearing inflation over the course of an expansion. And I really hope they stick with this, because it has a number of positives that also turns this into a positive, even if you feel bad about it right now. Gear inflation is a big problem. A character that has just hit level 120 right now in BFA compared to a geared character who is doing Mythic Nyalotha, for example, or very high Mythic Plus and has been doing for a while, is astronomical. It's like they're 5 expansions behind or something crazy like that. It's absolutely insane. So squashing that down changes it from starting off with a 1,000 damage Chaos Bolt at the start of the expansion to 60,000 or 100,000 by the end of the expansion, and then them having to do mega number squishes. It's also a good thing. Players should feel like they're getting more powerful. We all agree with that, but it doesn't need to be such a giant leap every time in order to feel it. Incremental increases are totally fine, and they worked for a decade or so in this game where we didn't have giant leaps all the time. So it's nice to see they're going back with that. The other effect of this is if you are a heroic raider or a mythic raider or somebody who does farm high-end Mythic Plus over the course of Season 1, ideally, this lower item level gearing inflation should mean that all your efforts aren't instantaneously wiped out from one day to another when the new season starts. Far bigger of a problem, at least in my eyes and the eyes of many in Battle for Azeroth, is that you could farm the hardest content in this game, be it in Mythic Plus or Extreme High-End Arena or Extreme Mythic Plus and Raiding, and then on Wednesday, your rewards were equal to a world quest, which was something that happened repeatedly in BFA and killed a lot of the soul of people wanting to farm, because a lot of people are entirely motivated by the pursuit of gear, and having their gear and their efforts completely invalidated from one day to another isn't fun. It would be very, very nice if the gear I acquire and the gear you guys acquire in the previous season makes sense going into the next season, and having lower and lower increments of jumping and gear strength should help with that, which means this is really just a start of Shadowlands issue for only some people. Does it kill the fun for some people? Yes, absolutely. I loved gearing up my character or going into Mythic Plus and gearing it up in those first few days when it was relevant and then helping my team out. I also enjoyed that the bluster of let's get in there, let's get the gearing your character from fresh is a really exciting time. A lot of that is now dead. That's just not something that's super relevant. You're going to do it a bit, but you're going to replace it extremely quickly if you are able to do heroic raiding and above, and the consequences of that we've already talked about. Overall, it's probably for the better, I think. I feel really bad for the guys who really wanted Mythic Plus to be its own pathway and its own course. You could still get Mythic Raid quality gear from Mythic Plus, so it's not all bad, but if you wanted it to be an exclusive, don't have to raid, that's probably not going to happen for a long time. But for the rest of us, it's going to be a mindset thing. There will be people who heroic raid, which encompasses a huge amount of the player base, even puggers, who now look at Mythic Plus as dead content, beyond their 1 weekly. Those raiders are now, or those players are now going to go into Mythic Plus knowing there's no reward for them at the end, especially after a couple of weeks once they've started to gather some gear, and be a little salty that they now have a 45-minute period or 25-minute period where they know there's no reward and the reward comes later on, and they're not interested in certainly doing it multiple times to increase their chances in the weekly guild vault when it's just a lot of time investment with no immediate satisfaction. And I think also a lot of people who only gear up through Mythic Plus are going to be very dissatisfied that they're only getting one item, but I'm hoping there'll be a mindset change there if they're more excited about getting that item. If they don't have it happen to them too often, but history tells us there are some players out there who will never get an item from Mythic Plus for weeks because of the nature of this system. That is going to happen, and I'm sure there'll be an outcry at that point. It's an interesting system. We'll see how well the community adapts this idea of way less items, but more targeted items via the weekly cash, and hopefully items that last a long time, because those are the two things that have been missing in BFA. Everything was replaceable. Everything happened all very quickly. Now it's going to be Everything happens much slower, but everything lasts much longer. If that's what we get out of this, 2 thumbs up from me. So those are the things to be aware of. Everything is linked down below for you to check out, and I will see you tomorrow, where hopefully we'll get this Venthyr video out. All right, bye-bye.